Norman, I have read the 3 books that have been published.
Well, I was not told I would have come if I
No, I have read the 3 books. They are different, and I think they represent in many ways various styles of writing, let me put it that way. And we'll come back to the books. But first of all, I don't know if you know who this man is, and I hardly do that myself. So I really want to go back. The facts of a biography, the simple facts, the straight facts is you were born in Romania, in Bukovina, as you say, in 1936. In 1941, you were deported with your family by the then Antonescu regime, the Hitler ally that deported you to the Transnistria region. I want to come back to this biographical part. And then you returned to your home after. You were able, actually, the whole family.
Almost.
Almost the whole
My
family.
grandparents died immediately in the camp.
Right. And then you became a Romanian young pioneer and a successful student, an engineer or something like that, and eventually also an intellectual and a writer. And then you had enough. In '86 you left, first Berlin and then United States.
Yes, it's correct.
That's a very short skeleton of your history. Tell us first, because this is about that first experience, I would say then, the crucial experience in your life, I would still say it is, the deportation of your family in 1941. Because people know about Auschwitz, but still it's quite well known, and you know, but the Romanian story with a whole homemade, self-made, fascist, anti-Semitic history and regime, and its own Judepolitik, its own policy of deporting Jews. Could you tell me from, first of all, or tell us about what was that all about, and what was your experience as a child?
As you said, I was deported as a Jew, but at 5 years old I was not a Jew, I was a child. I was a kid, I didn't even know exactly what this is. Although I had a grandfather which had the mythical name of Abraham. He had a bookstore and he had a beard. So I could imagine a bit what it means to be Jewish and to be Abraham. The shock in October 41, when we were suddenly deported, was for me, of course, very strong, very intense. First, because I didn't understand exactly what is happening. I was taken out from the very affectionate and protective enclave of the family, and I woke up in a train, in a wagon with a very crowded mass of people, unhappy and crying and desperate and praying and all this stuff. We were taken with this train, I think, for 2 days and a night, and the train stopped at the border with Ukraine, at the Dniester. Transnistria is Transnistria. I called it in my book, probably you know, Transnistria, because it was this experience with sadness and horror. So, as I said, I was totally dependent on my parents. And there it was a typical Romanian kind of camp. Some camps were governed by Romanians, some were by Germans. The big difference was the corruption. The corruption was dominant, I would say, in the Romanian camps. And this was a great advantage, because when you are able to corrupt some people, you are able to save your life.
So there were German camps too?
There were German camps too, there were Romanian camps, So it was this entire area occupied by the German and Romanian army. And some were administered by the Romanians, some were by the German. It depended where you in the end, you landed. It was not by choice. So we landed in this first area after the Dniester. We were put generally in houses where peasants were running away and were empty houses without heating, without food. The situation in the camp was mainly a situation of a very chaotic inferno. So it was not food, it was not medication, it was not heating. We were several families in a room, and you can imagine what it is when people occupy a small space and are desperate. The little boy reacted to this bleak reality instinctively. He didn't think a lot about the situation, but he was taken by hunger, by cold, by diseases, and mainly by the obsession of uncertainty. So this was the situation in the camps, especially in the first year and a half, 2 years, until Stalingrad. When Stalingrad happened, the Romanians, who are very, how to put it, accommodating and smartish, started to change a bit.
May I ask, was the purpose of the camps, as you know now, deportation? Was it the Holocaust that was prepared, or was this something else? Or was there a difference between the German and the Romanian? Were Jews deported eventually from Transnistria to the extermination camps?
No, there were themselves extermination camps. There were their camps, which were concentration camps, extermination camps. It depended how you saw them, but the policy was in 41. You remember the year, extremely anti-Semitic, with a lot of hatred and a lot of propaganda in the papers and everywhere, and also in the parliament, against the Jews. The pretext, which was totally absurd and childish, was that these Romanian Jews from Bukovina are not Romanian Jews, that they were from the older Habsburg Empire. So first we have to get rid of them. As I said, the purpose was extermination.
So but what means were Jews killed in the camps? By exhaustion, by starvation, or was there actual killing?
There were actually killing and executions, but they were not dominant. So mainly the extermination was to hunger, to disease, to this terrible situation. It is a novel by Edgar Hilsenrath, I don't know if you know it, and there he describes quite precisely such a camp where the fight for an apple or the fight for an aspirin was very cruel and fierce, and this was a total nightmare. It was no place to sleep, to live, to eat. This was the chaos of the camp in the first 2 years, which the goal of extermination was very clear.
But it was a different thing, and let's leave this historiography, but I want to make it clear, and perhaps, why didn't the Germans demand that the Romanian government, which was their ally friend, just deliver the Jews to...
They demanded, there were negotiations. I hope I don't upset anybody here, but the Romanians were smarter than the Germans. The negotiation was very long and complicated. They promised, there were even trains prepared, that the Jews will be sent to Auschwitz or I don't know where. There were interventions, there were delays. This is, for better or for worse, Romania, and it's even called the place in the middle between good and bad.
But why didn't the Romanian authority, like the Hungarians later, just deliver them? Why didn't they want to just do it as fast as possible and get rid of the Jews?
As I said, the Romanian psychology, for better or for worse, is more complicated. It's more oriental. It's more negotiable, if you want.
So did they want money, or did they want to sell the Jews?
No. They wanted to kill the Jews and to exterminate them. But there were forces there, always, which had another approach. Let's not do it so fast, let's see. And here there were some quite acute opinion. Let's see how the war evolves. They were allies of Germany, but they knew that if the Germans don't win, which was not a real possibility at that time in 1941, because the Germans were very victorious, but when they were stopped at Moscow, as you know, the first great attack, and the Germans were stopped at Moscow, and then came Stalingrad, a lot of doubts started. What are we doing if Germany loses? If Germany loses, we are on the side of the loser, and we may have a lot of problems. At the Paris conference in 1945, Germany, the Hungarians, which are not, I would say, in love with Romania, used to say that Romania loses all the battles and wins always at the negotiation and diplomacy. And perhaps it is true.
So they were more sensitive, would you say, than the Hungarians to what, because the Hungarians were delivering up in the summer of 1944.
So, I hope I'm not upsetting you. The Hungarians are more honest in their own cruel way. The Romanians are more mobile, more adjusting, more opportunistic, and this is for better or for worse. There are situations when this kind of behavior is helpful, and it was in this extreme situation.
Let's also place Romania politically at this period, because when you grew up and up till 1941, Romania was dominated by extreme nationalist, fascist, anti-Semitic movements, the Iron Guards, involving some of the most famous Romanian writers and intellectuals. Absolutely. It was a strong part of the Romanian reality. It was anti-Semitism, and nationalism. How do you, it's a Romanian specialty, this, and you don't find it in any other European country.
I would say the performance is not only Romanian, and the competition is still going on. So we cannot say it really so clearly.
But at this early time, I mean.
That early time,
yes,
you described very correctly. Yes. The period was totally crazy, anti-Semitic, nationalistic, fanatical, I would even say. Because what the Iron Guard said is what Al-Qaeda, in a way, says today. We need a pure country. We need to eliminate everything which is not pure. And as they say now in this ISIS, the infidels. They were not called infidels at that time. They were called impure and not Romanian. Now, this was 1941. And indeed, this was the situation.
So we are dealing with perhaps the country with the strongest homebred anti-Semitism, other countries were influenced by Germany, of course. We had the whole of Europe.
Absolutely.
But Romania had a homebred, home-cooked, strong nationalistic, anti-Semitic regime.
Absolutely.
And it didn't deliver up the Jews. That's actually you survived.
Yeah, and it's not the only Romanian paradox. I will give you one example about the communist time, and you will understand the country itself. In 1944, when the Red Army liberated, if we may say liberated, occupied Romania, the Communist Party had 1,000 members. It was nothing. In 1989, when the European communism collapsed, the Romanian Communist Party was potentially the biggest in Europe, almost 4 million members, but you couldn't find more 1,000 real communists. This is a picture of the country, of the adjustment. It's true that the anti-Semitism and heavy nationalism was deeply rooted in the Romanian history. But the fact that Germany at that time, which was, as you know, a Nazi state, very racist and anti-Semitic, was probably the biggest power in Europe, was extremely important. If you wouldn't have had Germany, I'm not very sure if this anti-Semitism would have flourished with the speed that it flourished in Romania. As I said, after Stalingrad, a big question mark arose. What should we do? These guys, these Germans, these Deutschland liberales, seems not to be liberales and seems to be weaker than we thought. So the Russians are coming, the Americans are preparing to come, so we'll see.
Let me come to some of your writing that comes out of this experience. This book, which is in Swedish, is called Oktober, klockan, åtta, is a collection of stories that, from various aspects, I assume, tell about a child growing up. These are different stories, but clearly influenced by the memories or the experience of you as a young child. It starts, the first story is very much so. And there is one passage, I try to find it, maybe I'll do it because I wanted to almost read it, where at some point in the story there is fear all the time in this book. The fear comes out, and it's written also in a phantasmagoric way, so the past and the present somehow goes and are interacting in a strange way. And at some, I think, passage you say, well, maybe now I realize that the fairy tale is true and the fear is there. Yeah, and it always comes back into how much of the story, this aspect of these stories is in your own mind, let's put it that way. Are you still living in this dual world of your childhood memories and the present? Is it still there?
As you said, this book was published in 1981. I was already, if we can call it so, an adult, but, or if you want, a child of 50 years old. Now, as I said, sometime our great artist, Benkush, said that a writer, if the artist is not more a child, he's dead. So a certain candor, a certain sensitivity is kept, but you evolve. So in 81 was already almost 40 years ago. Meantime, I had other kind of shocks. I never missed this kind of experiences. So I had to leave the country, I had to leave my language. So there are others. My writing is biographical inspired, as you see. But it's never autobiography. As you well know, writing, even stories which you lived to, are not a recording of that stories. So literature is changing the story to its own mechanism, to its own aesthetics. So it is as it is. Certainly, as somebody said at a certain point, that always literature is autobiography. If it's not, it's plagiarism. So I don't believe it, but still, even if you write about whatever you write, you are fed by your life, by your sensitivity, by your experience, by your readings. Everything comes together. And this is how, in my case, my past came together to become these books.
There is in almost all the stories, and many of them, a sense of bewilderment. The language is really a very special. It's I don't know how to compare it to anything else, but especially in these stories, it's, as I said, it's a child's or the writers or the tellers very incoherent or it doesn't have a sort of a straightforward narrative, but it's always coming into a introspective, I would even say, element in them that is. There is one story here which we don't have that much time, but there's one story here which also deals with the Jewish part of your life. You told us you were 5 years, you were not a Jew. There is a story in Oktober, klockan, åtta, which is called, I think in English, The Instructor. It's about the time when the narrator is going to be bar mitzvah, I understand, in this place. And he is already making for himself a new home in the communist Romania. You're a young pioneer, you're going out to a pioneer camp, you want to be a hero, you want to be on a propaganda movie, you are settling in, trying to find a new place in life. And this instructor and really disturbs everything because and you are really resenting him. But it's a beautiful, I must say, this is such a beautiful story because it also it's a moving portrait of this man. Could you tell us, out from this story, about your own relationship as it has developed with Judaism?
Yeah, but first I will answer this question of yours. When I came back from the camps, I did not have any fairy tales in my memory. My parents were too tense and traumatized. They never told me fairy tales. So my real very important fairy tale was communism. A wonderful utopia, we will all be wonderful, we'll all be equal, happiness will be everywhere. So I became a fierce, very childish, very young communist. The problem with the fairy tale, and this is a disturbing side which I felt, is that the fairy tale tells you usually that everything can become everything. This is a big force of the fairy tale, as we know it. Children accepted it. I was not more such a child, but at a certain point, and it is a story here which says it, I started to ask myself, if everything can become everything, then it means that the past can become again present. But I was a fierce young communist. My mother was, you probably know what this means, a Jewish mother. I defined the Jewish mother as an affectionate tyrant. She wanted very much to have me bar mitzvah, and I accepted it out of love of my parents. I was very close to them, although the separation started to be important for me. And I did it. I did it. At that time, I did it as you play a play in the synagogue. I had this wonderful teacher. By the way, he taught me Hebrew more than religion. And now when
you describe it in the story also, the language, yes.
He taught me Hebrew, grammar, all this stuff. And I must tell you that although I'm a bit older than I was at that time, sometimes when I have in my hands an Israeli Hebrew paper, I can here and there recognize a word and even understand the word. Although at that time for a kid, you know probably the Hebrew alphabet, it was with points. Mm-hmm. And now they publish it without points because it's not necessary. The population knows well the language and they can guess the word. So my relation to I never claimed in Romania that, and I couldn't bear it, that I am a victim, that I am this Jewish oppressed and unhappy being. In Romania, because Romania was my culture and my language, I tried to adjust. It was a language where I read everything. All the French, German, English writer, I read first in Romanian. So I never claimed for better or for worse Jewishness. I never negated.
That was my question. You never negated it, you say, but in this story, you are still you are ashamed when your parents put a little sack of tefillin in your luggage, because you are afraid someone will discover it.
Afraid also, not only ashamed, because I was going to a communist camp for children, and in my luggage was this mythical bomb. So, and of course I was afraid. I was a boy. And then, even there, as you know, I had another extreme experience, because I get involved, befriend with the instructor of the camp. He likes me, and he puts me in charge to censor the letters which the kids are writing back to their parents. Because the institutions, the ideologues were afraid that these kids will tell the parents the reality. We don't have food enough, it's not so beautiful as you think, believe me, it's terrible. So, and suddenly this kid, which was an honest, candid, childish communist, discovers something there which is very upsetting. He didn't like this role. And it's the first step to separating from this dogma. Now, giving up this utopia, because he needs still a utopia, he starts to look for another one and finds literature, the craziest one, as you well know. So that's a little story.
Absolutely. You have had reasons during your life to deal with sort of with anti-Semitism, with the whole debate that has been in Romania. But in this particular story, I'm struck by your knowledge of some Judaism, at least, because this protagonist of the story, he tells all kinds of things that you don't relate to because this is strange to you, but in fact it's very beautiful.
They are very beautiful, and I start to be fascinated by them. Even I couldn't approve them, I couldn't take them in. But I came from a Jewish traditional family, not very, very religious, but traditional. And this, I must tell, as I said, that I never claimed special, that I am from the selected, chosen people, but in the moment that the new anti-Semitism in the communist Romania started to be visible, I took position. And I was very much attacked in the press. And even this book was received to an extremely harsh, nasty article in a magazine which was considered by many people as the literary magazine of the secret police. I don't know if it was really so, but the guy who wrote the review almost denounced me as an enemy of Romania. It happened so, he was a very nasty guy. Great praise for Ceausescu and poems and all this stuff. It happened so that he died last week. And when a guy dies, you know how it is. You say only good things about the dead. Now in Romania appeared many articles about this happening with me. The way he received this book, how much anti-Semitism, covered or not covered, was in that review. So although I was not this type who enjoys the scene and enjoys the rhetoric of being speaking in the name of the Jews, in the moment when it was unavoidable, and the moment which was unavoidable was the early 80s, unavoidable means also in the Romanian case very dangerous. So I started to be more a suspect than I was before, and this was the first step toward estrangement and, in the end, leaving the country. When I arrived in the country of exiles, I lost this aura as being a victim of anti-Semitism. There, you know how it is. We are all equals. I saw that the guy from Ghana suffered even more than me, perhaps. So I started to be much more modest. But this is what we learn all the time. So I'm not really exactly the guy who wrote this book.
No, but I'm curious, because I will come to your continued role as a writer and public intellectual, first in Romania and then after. But in what way did the fact that you were forced again to become a Jew, or to make that choice, I don't know if there was a choice really in Romania, maybe there was, but you choose to identify and to, in some sense, but in what way did that bring you, did that make you more Jewish? Maybe, can one ask a question, or you are not, but you're a...
I think it did make me more Jewish, because I understood better my situation as a Jew, being far away from Romania. I understood this second and repeated exile in which I was forced, which is, as you know, very old Jewish experience. You are from a place, suddenly you are forced to go away, to estrange yourself, to go to another place. So, yes, I understood better my position as a Jew. And I don't dare to say, because it will be maybe immodest, that I am more Jewish now than I ever was, but the Jewishness in me, which was sleepy perhaps sometimes, although the sensitivity was always there, came out now. And I am very clearly this very young Jew who spoke with you.
When eventually you come into exile in '86, you become an American writer, and all this comes back to you because you become quite involved in the Romanian public debate by things you were writing. And I was wondering, one of the most, perhaps, one of the things you wrote that caused quite a lot of debate was a re-evaluation of Mircea Eliade, which was the big guru of, I guess, your generation as well, or
in a way,
yeah.
I mean, he had the advantage in the communist time that he was outside. Everything which was outside had an aura. You know how it is, of foreignness. Plus, he had the aura of being an anti-communist, which was very important for the people who lived in that type of dictatorship. Now, what I wrote was, as you probably know, very fiercely attacked in Romania.
It was you just pointed out his fascist, very open positions in the 30s.
Exactly,
yeah.
and everything which I said, I would consider a banality. It was not a huge discovery. I didn't discover his files at the secret police, or no. It was from his writing, in magazines, in books, and so on. So also because when I published this text in '91 in the States, I didn't have access. It was still 1991. I didn't have access to secret information. What came out after proved that I was perfectly right. In everything which I said, even I didn't know the entire story. I didn't know very much his behavior in exile, where he was in touch with this Romanian nationalist and former avant-gardist. So I tried, also because I came out from this communist dictatorship, where they made always a connection between your ideology and your writing, which I did not like. So I did not want to become this prosecutor, exactly the type of prosecutor which I knew from the communist Romania. So I tried, at least in this text, to separate as much as I could his ideological stand from his literary writing. So, and not to mix it and not to accuse him of something which was not true.
Which is quite reasonable. We can do it with many writers, actually.
Yeah, it's reasonable, but the fact that it's reasonable doesn't show that it's accepted.
But you were heavily attacked.
I was
think
very
Romania
heavily.
was divided on you, on this piece. Or
Divided is a nice word.
Okay.
It was not very divided, but yes, I was attacked. I must say that some years after, a Romanian young scholar who researched seriously the archive wrote a book about Eliade. And there you find the proof that everything which I said, even things which I was not totally sure about at that time, were perfectly true. This is not an article, as it was mine, in a magazine. This is a book. And the book proves, page after page, what was with his traditional view of Romanian nationality and nationalism, and his evolution. You know, I was befriended with, very befriended with Sol Bello. And I even had a book with him, a dialogue, a long dialogue, which I would like to appear in Sweden. But when I came to the States, he was close to Eliade. And our first meeting was very uncomfortable for him, because his good friend, Philip Roth.
Eliade was in Chicago, wasn't he?
Yes,
yeah,
at the University of Chicago. He had a chair there. And the University of Chicago, when I published my article, was extremely upset. you know. They couldn't contradict me because I still know better Romanian history and Romanian writing, but they were upset that a guy like this, very famous, with a chair there, proved to be a former iron-guardist and a former nationalist. But I remember this because my friend Philip Roth, I was closer to Philip than to Saul Bellow, said, look, I don't understand Saul, because Saul is smelling an anti-Semite 500 miles away. If he did not feel that Eliade was an anti-Semite, this is for me a big shock. And he sent this article to Bellow. It happens that we were at the same conference at a certain point, and we became very close friends after. But at that time, he was extremely uncomfortable. He felt ashamed, he felt guilty about this friendship, and in his novel, his very last novel, he said at a certain point, in order, in a way, to make fun of himself, look, I don't believe in Romanian fascists.
But
they are not honest. They are not honest enough. They are now fascists, tomorrow they are communists, so it's not such a big deal. Yeah.
The debate that it eventually evolved in Romania was about, and it involved also the role of the right-wing fascist, anti-Semitic movements and personalities, whether they should actually be treated, criticized the way. Shouldn't they be compared to the communists? I mean, wasn't that worse or that good? It started to become a competition of comparison.
Absolutely. This after '89, it started this very fierce and nasty debate comparing communism to Nazism and Holocaust to Gulag. And saying, yes, we understand that the Holocaust is obsessing you, but we have also our obsession with communism. They didn't ask themselves, why 4 million people became members of the party, and why these 4 million people, one day after the dictator was killed, became fierce anti-communists. They didn't ask this. But, of course, there are similarities between these totalitarian situations, but they are not identical. They are never identical. The end result is terrible in both cases. But the ideology is different. I mean, the racist Nazi ideology is one thing. The communist, very promising ideology, which was inspired by the French Revolution, and has this great ideal which it betrayed and it destroyed, and it made a joke of it, still, from a very dogmatic point of view and literal point of view, it was a big difference. You cannot compare one with the other. You can compare the results.
Your life has been, we shall end this, maybe there are a few questions, let's put it mildly, very dramatic, not mentioning your childhood and the time in Romania, but also, as I say, the aftermath, when you become embroiled in the politics, the cultural wars, let's put it, of Romania. You sit up there, some beautiful place in the United States, Bard College, and you are in the midst of turmoil. I just want to say this because these books, especially the Return of the Hooligans, which is a memoir of yours, one can say. It's
kind of, yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Literary, very much so, but still. And it's a good read. It's a fascinating piece of European history, one that I didn't know. Of course I didn't know who is the president of Romania.
I'm very pleased that I was able to inform you.
Yes, and I'm very happy to be informed.
And listen, to improve you.
Yeah. My whole task is to just hide my ignorance. And sorry, I totally failed at the end. Here.
This is a Jewish trick, yes, always, to hide your bad side.
Yes. Thank you, Norman Manea, for coming here, for being in Sweden, for writing the books, for talking to me, to us tonight, and thank you, everybody. That's it.
you.